My uncle slammed the folder on the conference table, his voice cutting through the room like glass. "You're fired, Alex, effective immediately." Around the table, my cousins didn't even pretend to look surprised. Brandon smirked into his coffee cup. My aunt folded her hands like she was disappointed but not shocked. I stood there, my laptop bag still on my shoulder, and the only thing I could think was how predictable this moment had always been. "All right," I said. My uncle blinked. He'd expected me to beg, to argue, to break down the way I had when I was younger, and he told me I'd never amount to anything. But I wasn't that kid anymore. I turned toward the door, my footsteps echoing in the silence. Behind me, I heard Brandon whisper, "Good riddance." What none of them knew was that I'd been planning this exit for 2 years. And by the time they realized what I'd built in the shadows, it would already be too late. Growing up in my uncle's house wasn't living, it was surviving. After my parents died in a car accident when I was 9, he took me in not out of love but out of obligation. His wife made that clear the first night. "You'll earn your keep," she said, setting a plate of leftovers in front of me while Brandon and his sister Natalie ate fresh chicken at the dining table. I did earn it. I cleaned, I cooked, I stayed quiet, I made myself small enough not to be a problem. But no matter how invisible I tried to be, I was always the reminder that their perfect family had been interrupted. By the time I was in high school, the labels were set. Brandon was the smart one, Natalie was the creative one, and I was the charity case who should be grateful. So I learned to be grateful, to swallow every insult, every dismissal, every moment they made me feel worthless. When I graduated high school, my uncle called it a miracle. "Didn't think you'd make it," he said at the dinner table, not even looking up from his steak. I'd gotten a full scholarship to a state college, but he acted like I'd barely scraped by. Brandon had gone to a private university, funded entirely by my uncle, and everyone talked about his bright future in the family trucking business. I worked 3 jobs to stay in school. I studied computer science, not because it was trendy, but because it made sense to me. Code didn't lie, it didn't play favorites, it either worked or it didn't. My professors noticed. They told me I had a gift. But when I came home during breaks, my uncle still made me sleep in the basement and told visitors I was figuring things out. The gap between who I was becoming and who they saw me as grew wider every year. After college, I joined my uncle's company, not because I wanted to, but because he cornered me at Thanksgiving. "Family business needs young blood," he said. "You owe me that much." So I took the job. Operations assistant, they called it, which really meant doing everyone else's work. I built their new scheduling system from scratch. I streamlined their routes, cutting fuel costs by 30%. I solved problems no one else understood. And every time, Brandon took the credit. My uncle never questioned it. When promotions came, Brandon moved up. I stayed where I was. When bonuses were handed out, I got a handshake. He got a check. I stopped expecting fairness. Instead, I started planning something else. It started small. A freelance project here, a consultation there. I used my lunch breaks and late nights to build a side business, creating logistics software for small trucking companies. I didn't tell anyone. My uncle would have seen it as betrayal, even though his company barely used half of what I'd already given them. The first client paid me $2,000. The second paid $5,000. By the end of the first year, I'd made $40,000 on the side. I saved every cent. No new car, no fancy apartment, no vacations I could brag about. I lived like I had nothing because I needed them to keep thinking I was nothing. Their blindness was my advantage, and while they laughed at me during family dinners, my bank account grew in silence. 2 years into working for my uncle, I landed a major contract. A regional shipping company wanted custom software to automate their entire dispatch system. The project was worth $150,000. I worked every night for 4 months, barely sleeping, coding until my eyes burned. When I delivered it, the client called it flawless. They referred me to 3 other companies. Within 6 months, my side business had made more than I'd earned in 2 years working for my uncle. I opened a separate account. I met with a lawyer. I set up an LLC. I built something real, something mine, something no one could take credit for. And I told no one, not a single person. At the family business, things got worse. My uncle promoted Brandon to VP of Operations, the role I'd been doing without the title for years. In the meeting, my uncle said, "Brandon's vision is taking us forward." I watched Brandon nod like he'd done anything other than show up late and delegate. My aunt hugged him. Natalie posted about it on social media. No one even glanced my way. That night, Brandon stopped by my desk. "Don't worry, Alex," he said, grinning. "You'll always have a place here. Somebody's got to do the grunt work." I nodded, I smiled, and I went home and signed my 8th client, a deal worth $120,000. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. My uncle called me into his office, Brandon sitting beside him. "We need to talk about your performance," my uncle said. I knew what was coming. They'd been setting me up for weeks, giving me impossible deadlines, projects with no resources, then blaming me when things went wrong. Brandon slid a folder across the desk. "These missed deadlines are unacceptable." Every single one had been caused by Brandon pulling my team off projects to work on his vanity initiatives. I had emails proving it, but I didn't say that, I just listened. "We're letting you go," my uncle said. "It's not personal." Brandon's smirk said otherwise, and that's when I said, "All right." Didn't go home, I went to my lawyer's office. "I want everything finalized by Friday," I told him. He'd been preparing my exit paperwork for months. Contract terminations, non-compete clauses, intellectual property protections. Everything I'd built for the family company was documented, time-stamped, copyrighted under my name. They never asked me to sign anything over. They just assumed it was theirs. By Thursday, I'd pulled every piece of custom software I'd created out of their systems. Legally, quietly, the scheduling system crashed Friday morning. The route optimization tool stopped working. The client management portal went dark, and I was already 3 states away, meeting with my biggest client yet. My phone exploded over the weekend. 12 missed calls from my uncle, 6 from Brandon, frantic texts from my aunt. I didn't answer. On Monday, I sent one email to my uncle. It included a list of every system I'd built, every line of code I'd written, every solution I'd created that kept his company running. At the bottom, I wrote, "These systems were never company property. They were mine, good luck." Then I blocked their numbers. My lawyer sent a follow-up letter confirming everything. No threats, no drama, just facts. By Wednesday, my uncle's company had lost 2 major clients because they couldn't fulfill orders. Their systems were in chaos. And I was signing a $300,000 contract with a national freight company. 6 months later, my business had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. I had 15 employees, office space downtown, clients across 4 states. Revenue projections hit 7 figures. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Then I got the call. It was my uncle. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Alex," he said, his voice strained. "We need to talk." I waited. "The company's struggling. Brandon's ideas aren't working. We need your help." I let the silence sit. "I know we didn't treat you right," he continued, "but family is family. We can work something out." I thought about all the years I'd begged for respect, for recognition, for the smallest acknowledgement that I mattered. "No," I said simply. "Good luck, though," and I hung up. A month later, Brandon showed up at my office. Security called me before letting him up. I almost said no, but I was curious what desperation looked like on him. He stood in my lobby, looking smaller somehow. Gone was the smirk, the swagger. "Alex," he said, "I need a job." I leaned against the desk. "You're asking me for a job," he nodded. "Things fell apart after you left. Dad's company's barely surviving. I can't find work anywhere." Everyone knows I didn't actually do anything. For a moment, I felt something almost like pity. "Almost. I'm not hiring," I said, "but I appreciate you stopping by." His face reddened. The old Brandon flickered back. "You're really going to do this after everything we gave you?" And there it was, the delusion. "You gave me nothing," I said quietly. "You took everything and called it generosity. Now you know what it feels like to have nothing." He left without another word. The business kept growing. By the end of the year, I'd bought a house. Not massive, just mine. I stood in the empty living room, sunlight pouring through the windows, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. I thought about my parents sometimes, wondered what they'd think. I liked to believe they'd be proud. Not of the money, but of the fact that I hadn't let bitterness hollow me out. I built something good. I hired people who'd been overlooked like me. I paid them well, treated them with respect, created the kind of place I'd wished I'd had. And when my team succeeded, I made sure everyone knew it was their work, not mine. That's the difference between me and my uncle. He built a kingdom on taking credit. I built a company on giving it. A year after I left, I ran into Natalie at a coffee shop. She looked tired. "Alex," she said, hesitating, "can we talk?" I gestured to the chair across from me. She sat slowly, holding her cup like it was the only warm thing in her life. "I'm sorry," she said, "for everything, for how we treated you." I waited. "Brandon's gone. He moved across the country. Dad's business declared bankruptcy last month. Mom won't talk to me because I didn't take their side." She looked up. "You were right to leave." I didn't feel victorious. I just felt sad for the years we'd all lost. "I forgive you," I said, not because she deserved it, but because I did. She cried quietly, and I sat with her until she was ready to leave. Some bridges can't be rebuilt, but at least we could stop burning them. Sometimes people ask how I did it, how I went from nothing to building something real. The answer isn't complicated. I worked when no one was watching. I saved when others spent. I believed in myself when everyone else said I was worthless. And I refused to let their version of me become the truth. They called me useless, and I let them. Because while they were talking, I was building. While they were taking credit, I was creating value. While they were celebrating mediocrity, I was mastering my craft. The day I walked out of that conference room, I wasn't running away. I was walking toward the life I'd been building in secret all along. And when they finally saw my bank account, when they realized what I'd become, it wasn't a surprise to me. It was just confirmation of what I'd always known. I was never useless. I was just surrounded by people too blind to see my worth. And the moment I stopped waiting for their approval, I became unstoppable. If you've ever been called useless by people who never bothered to see what you were building, this story is for you. Your worth isn't determined by those who refuse to recognize it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't fighting back. It's walking away and becoming everything they said you couldn't be. Success built in silence always speaks the loudest. If this story resonated with you, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And remember, the people who underestimate you today will be the same ones asking for favors tomorrow. Stay focused, stay quiet, and keep building. Thanks for listening. Like and subscribe so that you don't miss what happens next.